There was a boy named Leo who lived in a small village at the edge of a great forest, and everyone in the village knew that the forest was a place of mystery and danger. Leo was 12 years old, and he had brown hair that always fell into his eyes, no matter how many times his mother cut it shorter. And his eyes were the color of honey in the sunlight, which made the other children say he looked like a cat. He lived with his grandmother in a tiny cottage made of stone and wood, and the cottage had a red door that creaked every time someone opened it. And Leo always thought the creaking sounded like the house was trying to say hello. His grandmother was a kind woman with silver hair that she kept in a long braid down her back, and she told Leo stories every night before he went to sleep. And these were not ordinary stories, but tales of a hidden valley that existed somewhere deep within the forest. The valley is protected by ancient magic, his grandmother would say as she tucked him in the bed. And only those with pure hearts can find the entrance. And those who enter the valley will discover treasures beyond their wildest dreams. Leo always asked his grandmother if the stories were true, and she would smile and say that all stories hold some truth within them. And then she would kiss his forehead and blow out the candle. One morning, Leo woke up to find that his grandmother was very sick, and her face was pale like snow, and her breathing was shallow and weak, and Leo felt fear grip his heart like a cold hand. The village healer came to look at his grandmother, and the healer was an old man with a long white beard and kind eyes. And after examining her, he shook his head sadly. "There is only one thing that can save her," the healer said in a voice that was soft but serious. "And that is the flower that grows only in the hidden valley. The flower with petals of gold and a center of silver. And if she drinks tea made from this flower, she will be healed." Leo felt his heart pound in his chest because he knew what he had to do. And even though he was afraid, he knew he had to find the hidden valley and bring back the golden flower to save his grandmother. That very afternoon, Leo packed a small bag with bread and cheese and a bottle of water. And he put on his warmest coat because the forest was cold, even in summer. And he told his grandmother that he would return with the flower. His grandmother held his hand weakly and looked into his eyes with love and worry. And she whispered that he must be brave and trust his heart. And she gave him a small silver compass that had belonged to his grandfather. "This compass does not point north," she said with a faint smile, "but it points toward what your heart truly seeks, and if you follow it with faith, it will lead you where you need to go." Leo kissed his grandmother's cheek and promised to return soon. And then he walked out of the cottage and closed the red door behind him. And the door creaked as if saying goodbye. The forest stood before him like a wall of green and brown, and the trees were so tall that their tops seemed to touch the clouds, and the shadows between the trees looked dark and mysterious. Leo took a deep breath and stepped into the forest, and immediately the sounds of the village faded away, and all he could hear was the rustling of leaves and the singing of birds hidden in the branches above. He looked at the compass in his hand, and the needle was spinning slowly, and then it stopped and pointed toward a narrow path that wound between two enormous oak trees. Leo followed the path, and the forest grew thicker around him, and strange mushrooms grew on the sides of trees, and some of them glowed with a faint blue light that was both beautiful and eerie. As he walked deeper into the forest, Leo heard strange sounds that he had never heard before. And there were whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. And there were footsteps that matched his own but came from behind the trees. He felt scared, but he remembered his grandmother's words about being brave and trusting his heart. And so he kept walking even when his legs wanted to stop. After walking for what felt like hours, Leo came to a stream that flowed across the path. And the water was crystal clear and sparkled like diamonds in the patches of sunlight that broke through the leaves. He knelt down to drink some water because his bottle was already empty, and the water tasted sweeter than any water he had ever drunk before, and it made him feel stronger and more awake. As he stood up, Leo noticed something strange on the other side of the stream, and it was a rabbit. But not an ordinary rabbit, because this rabbit had fur that was pure white and eyes that were bright purple. The rabbit sat very still and looked at Leo as if it was waiting for something, and then it hopped away slowly, stopping every few steps to look back at Leo as if inviting him to follow. Leo looked at his compass, and the needle was pointing in the same direction that the rabbit was going, and so he decided to follow the strange white rabbit, hoping it would lead him closer to the hidden valley. He crossed the stream by stepping on large flat rocks that stuck out of the water, and the rocks were slippery, but Leo was careful and made it across without falling. The rabbit led Leo through parts of the forest that seemed magical, and there were flowers that sang soft melodies when the wind blew, and there were butterflies with wings that left trails of sparkling dust in the air. As the sun began to set and the forest grew darker, Leo started to worry that he would have to spend the night alone in the forest, and that thought made him shiver with fear. But just as he was about to give up hope, the white rabbit stopped in front of a wall of thick vines, and it looked at Leo one more time before hopping right through the vines and disappearing. Leo walked up to the vines and pushed them aside with his hands, and what he saw on the other side took his breath away, and he knew that his journey was about to become even more incredible. Behind the wall of vines, Leo found a small clearing where the moonlight shone down like a silver spotlight, and in the center of the clearing stood a tiny cottage that looked like it was made entirely of crystals. The cottage sparkled and glowed with colors that shifted from blue to purple to pink, and it was the most beautiful thing Leo had ever seen in his whole life. The white rabbit sat on the doorstep of the crystal cottage, and it seemed to be waiting for Leo to come closer, and its purple eyes glowed softly in the moonlight. Leo walked slowly toward the cottage, and his heart was beating fast with excitement and curiosity, and he wondered who could possibly live in such a magical place. Before he could knock on the door, it swung open by itself, and standing in the doorway was a woman who looked both young and old at the same time, and her hair was the color of starlight, and her eyes were deep green like the forest. "I have been expecting you, young Leo," the woman said in a voice that sounded like music, "and I know why you have come to this forest, and I know about your grandmother and the golden flower you seek." Leo was surprised that this strange woman knew his name and his purpose, but something about her felt trustworthy and kind, and so he did not feel afraid. "Please, come inside and rest," the woman said as she stepped aside to let Leo enter, "for you have traveled far, and the journey ahead is even longer, and you will need your strength." Leo stepped inside the crystal cottage, and the inside was even more amazing than the outside. And everything seemed to glow with a soft, warm light, and there were books everywhere, stacked on shelves and piled on tables, and even floating in the air. "My name is Alara," the woman said as she poured Leo a cup of warm tea that smelled like honey and flowers. "And I am the guardian of this part of the forest, and I help those who are pure of heart find their way." Leo sat down in a comfortable chair that seemed to hug him like a cloud, and he sipped the tea, and it filled him with warmth and hope. "The hidden valley is real," Alara continued as she sat across from Leo, "and the golden flower does grow there. But finding the valley is not easy, and there are 3 trials you must pass before you can enter." Leo felt his stomach tighten with worry because he was just a boy from a small village, and he had never done anything brave or special in his life, and he wondered if he could really pass 3 trials. Alara seemed to sense his worry, and she smiled gently and said, "The trials are not about strength or speed or cleverness, but they are about heart and courage and love. And I can see that you have all 3 of these things inside you." She then told Leo about the 3 trials, and the first trial was the trial of truth, where he would have to face his deepest fears and tell the truth about who he really was. The second trial was the trial of trust, where he would have to put his faith in someone else completely, even when everything seemed dangerous and wrong. And the third trial was the trial of sacrifice, where he would have to give up something precious to prove that his love for others was greater than his love for himself. Leo listened carefully to everything Ilara said, and even though he was scared, he knew that he would do anything to save his grandmother. And so he told Ilara that he was ready to face the trials. Ilara smiled proudly at Leo and gave him 3 gifts to help him on his journey. And the first gift was a small mirror that showed not your face, but your true self. And she said this would help him in the trial of truth. The second gift was a golden thread that was so thin it was almost invisible, but so strong it could never break. And she said this would help him in the trial of trust. And the third gift was a single white feather that came from a bird that lived between the worlds. And she said this would help him in the trial of sacrifice, though she did not explain how. Leo put the 3 gifts carefully in his bag, and he thanked Ilara with all his heart, and she told him to rest for the night because his journey would continue at dawn. That night, Leo slept in a bed made of clouds and dreams, and he had visions of his grandmother smiling and healthy, and these visions gave him the courage he needed. When the sun rose the next morning, Ilara woke Leo with a gentle touch and gave him a breakfast of fruits that tasted like nothing he had ever eaten before, some sweet and some tangy and all delicious. "Follow the compass, and it will lead you to the first trial," Ilara said, as she walked Leo to the door of the cottage. "And remember that the magic of the trials will test you, but it cannot harm you unless you let fear take control of your heart." Leo thanked Ilara one more time and stepped out of the crystal cottage, and the white rabbit was waiting for him, and it hopped along the path as if showing him the way once again. He followed the rabbit for most of the morning, and the forest changed as he walked deeper into it, and the trees became older and taller, and the air became thicker with magic that made his skin tingle. Finally, the rabbit stopped in front of a cave that was carved into the side of a great hill, and strange blue flames burned at the entrance of the cave, and Leo knew that this was where the first trial waited. The rabbit looked at Leo with its purple eyes and then hopped away into the forest, leaving Leo alone in front of the cave. Leo took a deep breath and pulled out the small mirror that Ilara had given him, and he looked into it, expecting to see his own face. But instead he saw darkness swirling like smoke. He put the mirror back in his bag and walked toward the cave, and as he passed through the blue flames, he felt a strange sensation like walking through cold water. But he was not wet when he came out the other side. Inside the cave, it was not dark as Leo had expected, but filled with a soft golden light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. And standing in the center of the cave was a figure that made Leo gasp with shock, because the figure looked exactly like him. Same brown hair, same honey-colored eyes, same clothes, everything the same. "I am your shadow self," the figure said, in a voice that was Leo's voice, but colder and harder. "And I know all your secrets and all your fears, and to pass this trial, you must face the truth about who you really are." Leo felt his heart pound as the shadow self began to speak about all the things Leo had tried to hide, all the times he had been jealous or angry or scared, all the times he had lied or been unkind. "You pretend to be brave, but you are a coward," the shadow self said with a cruel smile. "And you pretend to love your grandmother, but you also resent her for the things you cannot have, and you are selfish and weak." Leo felt tears burn in his eyes because some of what the shadow self said was true, and he had felt jealous of other children who had parents, and he had sometimes wished for a different life. But then Leo remembered the mirror, and he pulled it out and looked into it again, and this time he did not see darkness, but a light that was warm and golden. He looked at his shadow self and said with a voice that shook but did not break, "Yes, I have felt all those things, and yes, I have been afraid and jealous and angry, but those feelings do not make me bad, and they do not change the love I have for my grandmother. The shadow self's smile faded, and Leo continued to speak the truth from his heart. I am not perfect, and I make mistakes, and sometimes I feel things that I am not proud of. But I am also kind and loving and brave when it matters. And I am trying to be better every day, and that is the truth of who I am. As Leo spoke these words, the shadow self began to fade, and the golden light in the cave grew brighter, and Leo felt a warmth spread through his whole body. You have passed the trial of truth, a voice echoed through the cave, and you have shown that true courage is not about being perfect, but about accepting who you are and still choosing to be good. The cave began to dissolve around Leo, and he found himself standing in the forest again, and he knew that 2 more trials awaited him, but he felt stronger and more ready than ever before. Leo stood in the forest, breathing heavily from what had just happened in the cave, and he felt different now, lighter somehow, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He pulled out his grandfather's compass and watched as the needle spun and then pointed toward a direction where the trees grew so close together that they seemed to form a wall of wood and leaves. With new confidence in his heart, Leo walked toward the trees, and as he got closer, he noticed that there was a narrow gap between 2 of the largest trees, just wide enough for him to squeeze through. He pushed himself through the gap, and on the other side, he found something he did not expect at all, and it was a wide river that flowed with water as dark as night. The river was too wide to jump across and too dark to see how deep it was, and Leo looked up and down the riverbank but could not see any bridge or boat or any way to cross. As he stood there wondering what to do, he heard a sound behind him, and he turned to see a young girl about his age stepping out from behind a tree. The girl had dark curly hair and bright blue eyes, and she wore a green dress that was torn and dirty, and she looked just as lost and confused as Leo felt. "Who are you?" Leo asked, and his hand moved toward his bag where he kept the gifts from Alara, because he did not know if this girl was friend or enemy. "My name is Maya," the girl said in a voice that sounded tired and sad, "and I have been lost in this forest for 3 days. And I have been searching for a way across this river, but there is none." Leo felt sorry for Maya because she looked so scared and alone, and he remembered what Alara had told him about the trial of trust, and he wondered if this was part of the second trial. "I am Leo," he said as he relaxed a little, "and I am on a journey to find the hidden valley because my grandmother is sick, and I need to find a golden flower to save her." Maya's eyes grew wide when she heard about the hidden valley, and she said that she had heard stories about it too, and that her father had once told her that the valley was protected by magic that only the worthy could pass. Leo and Maya talked for a while, and Leo learned that Maya had come into the forest looking for her little brother who had wandered away from their village, and she had gotten lost while searching for him. "I found my brother hiding in a hollow tree," Maya said with relief in her voice, "and I sent him home, but then I could not find my own way back, and now I am stuck here at this impossible river." Leo looked at the dark water of the river, and an idea came to his mind, and he pulled out the golden thread that Alara had given him. "Maybe this can help us," Leo said as he showed Maya the thin but strong thread, "because it was given to me by a guardian of the forest, and she said it would help in the trial of trust." Maya looked at the thread and then looked at Leo, and there was doubt in her eyes, because how could such a thin thread help them cross such a wide river? But then something amazing happened, and Maya gasped as the thread began to glow and grow, stretching and weaving itself into a rope that shot across the river and attached to a tree on the other side. The rope was long and thin and swayed in the wind above the dark water, and Leo knew that he would have to walk across it like a tightrope walker in a circus. "I cannot do that," Maya said with fear in her voice, "because I am afraid of heights and I am afraid of falling, and I am afraid of that dark water that looks like it would swallow me up." Leo looked at the rope and then at Maya, and he understood what the trial of trust really meant, and it was not about trusting in himself, but about trusting in another person. "I will go first," Leo said with a bravery he did not fully feel. "And then I will help you across, and you will have to trust me completely, even when it feels impossible." Maya looked at Leo with tears in her eyes, and she nodded slowly, and Leo stepped onto the golden rope. The rope was thin, but it was strong, and it did not move or shake as Leo walked across it. And soon he was on the other side of the river. "Now it is your turn," Leo called out to Maya, "and you must trust the rope and trust me, and do not look down at the water." Maya stepped onto the rope, and her legs were shaking, and her face was pale with fear. But she kept her eyes on Leo and took one step and then another. Halfway across, a strong wind blew, and Maya screamed and almost fell. But she grabbed the rope with both hands and held on. "Trust me," Leo shouted. "Keep your eyes on me and keep walking, and I promise you will make it across." Maya took a deep breath and stood back up on the rope, and she kept her eyes locked on Leo's face. And she walked slowly but steadily until she was close enough for Leo to reach out and grab her hand. Leo pulled Maya to safety on the riverbank, and they both fell to the ground, breathing hard and laughing with relief. "You did it," Leo said with a big smile. "You trusted me, and you made it across." Maya hugged Leo tightly and thanked him for helping her. And then something strange happened, and Maya's body began to shimmer and change. Leo stepped back in surprise as Maya transformed into a beautiful woman made entirely of light, and her voice echoed like bells when she spoke. "I am the spirit of trust," the woman said with a warm smile. "And you have passed the second trial, not just because you trusted the rope and trusted yourself, but because you helped another person trust as well." Leo understood now that Maya had been part of the trial all along, and the real test was not just his own courage, but his ability to help others find courage too. "The third trial awaits you," the spirit of trust continued. "And it will be the hardest of all, but you have shown great heart, and I believe you will succeed." The spirit of trust pointed toward a mountain that Leo could now see in the distance. A mountain with a peak that glowed with golden light even though it was still daylight. "The entrance to the hidden valley is at the top of that mountain," the spirit said. "But to reach it, you must pass the trial of sacrifice, and you must be prepared to give up something precious." Leo nodded and thanked the spirit, and she smiled once more before fading away into sparkles of light that floated up toward the sky. Leo was alone again, but he did not feel alone, because he carried with him the lessons he had learned from the first two trials, and he felt ready to face whatever came next. He began walking toward the mountain, and the forest around him became thinner and the ground became rockier, and soon he was out of the forest entirely and standing at the base of the great mountain. The mountain was tall and steep, and there was a narrow path that wound around and around toward the top, and Leo knew that the climb would be long and difficult. He started up the path, and his legs soon grew tired, and the air grew colder as he climbed higher, and he wrapped his coat tighter around himself. As he climbed, Leo thought about his grandmother waiting for him at home, and he thought about the golden flower that would save her life, and these thoughts gave him the strength to keep going. The sun began to set as Leo reached a flat area near the top of the mountain, and he decided to rest there for the night because it was too dangerous to climb in the dark. He found a small cave in the rock that would shelter him from the wind, and he ate the last of his bread and cheese, and he curled up and fell asleep thinking of home. In his dreams, Leo saw his grandmother healthy and happy, and she was making his favorite soup and singing the song she used to sing when he was very small. The dream made Leo smile, and it filled him with determination. And when the sun rose the next morning, he was ready to complete the final trial and find the hidden valley. Leo woke up with the first light of dawn, and his body was stiff from sleeping on the hard ground, but his spirit was strong and ready for the final trial. He climbed out of the small cave and looked up at the peak of the mountain, and he could see that he was very close now. Just a few more hours of climbing, and he would reach the top. The path became steeper and more dangerous as Leo climbed higher, and sometimes he had to use his hands to pull himself up over large rocks. And sometimes he had to jump across gaps in the path where the rock had crumbled away. But Leo did not give up, and he kept climbing, and finally, after what felt like forever, he reached the very top of the mountain. What he saw there took his breath away, and he had to stop and stare because it was so beautiful and so strange. At the top of the mountain was a great stone archway that glowed with golden light, and through the archway, Leo could see a valley filled with flowers and trees and a crystal-clear river. And it was more beautiful than anything he had ever imagined. "The hidden valley," Leo whispered with wonder in his voice, and his heart filled with hope because the golden flower that would save his grandmother was somewhere in that beautiful place. But between Leo and the archway stood a figure, and this figure was tall and dressed in robes of silver and gold, and its face was hidden by a hood that cast deep shadows. "I am the guardian of the gate," the figure said in a voice that was neither male nor female, but something in between. "And before you can enter the hidden valley, you must pass the trial of sacrifice." Leo nodded because he had expected this, and he pulled out the white feather that Alara had given him, the third gift that was supposed to help him. The guardian looked at the feather and then looked at Leo, and it spoke again in its strange, echoing voice. "The trial of sacrifice is different for every person who comes here, and the magic of the trial will ask you to give up something precious, and you must decide if you are willing to pay the price." Leo gripped the feather tightly in his hand and said that he was ready to give up anything to save his grandmother. The guardian nodded and raised its hands, and suddenly the world around Leo began to change, and he found himself not on the mountain but back in his own village. He was standing in front of his grandmother's cottage, and the red door was open, and he could smell his grandmother's cooking coming from inside. Leo ran into the cottage and found his grandmother standing at the stove, stirring a pot of soup, and she looked healthy and happy and not sick at all. "Grandmother!" Leo cried out and ran to hug her, and she hugged him back and laughed. And it was the most wonderful sound Leo had ever heard. "My dear Leo," his grandmother said as she stroked his hair, "I am so glad you are home, and now we can be together forever, just the two of us." Leo felt tears of joy running down his face because this was everything he wanted. His grandmother healthy, his home safe, his life simple and happy. But then he noticed something strange, and when he looked out the window, he could not see the village, only a white mist that surrounded the cottage. "Grandmother, what is happening?" Leo asked with confusion in his voice. "Where is the village, and where are all the other people?" His grandmother smiled, but the smile looked different now, a little too wide and a little too bright. "There is no village here," his grandmother said, "because this is your perfect world, a world where you never have to be afraid or sad, a world where we can be together always." Leo stepped back from his grandmother because he suddenly understood what was happening. And this was not real. This was the trial. And the magic was offering him a perfect dream in exchange for giving up the real world. "If you stay here," his grandmother continued, "you will never feel pain again, and you will never lose me, and you will be happy forever. But you must give up your real life and everyone in it." Leo felt his heart being pulled in two directions, because part of him wanted to stay in this perfect place where his grandmother was healthy and nothing bad could ever happen. But another part of him knew that this was not true happiness, that running away from pain meant also running away from real love and real life. He remembered the white feather in his hand, and he looked at it, and somehow he understood what he had to give up. "I know what my sacrifice must be," Leo said in a voice that was steady, even though his heart was breaking. "And it is not giving up my real life for a dream." He held up the white feather, and it began to glow with a soft light. "My sacrifice is giving up the need for a perfect life," Leo continued, "and accepting that pain and loss are part of love, and that true love means being brave enough to feel everything, even the hard things." As Leo spoke these words, the dream world around him began to crack like glass, and the fake grandmother faded away, and Leo found himself back on the mountaintop. But he was not alone, because kneeling before him was a small glowing creature that looked like a tiny dragon made of light. "You have passed the trial of sacrifice," the creature said in a voice like tinkling bells. "And your sacrifice was the hardest kind of all, because you gave up the comfort of a perfect dream for the courage to face an imperfect reality." Leo looked at his hand and saw that the white feather was gone, transformed into the tiny dragon that now flew around his head. "I am born from your sacrifice," the dragon said, "and I will be your companion and guide as you enter the hidden valley." The guardian of the gate bowed to Leo and stepped aside, and the golden archway glowed even brighter. "You have proven yourself worthy," the guardian said, "and the hidden valley welcomes you, young hero." Leo walked toward the archway with the tiny dragon flying beside him, and as he stepped through the golden light, he felt a warmth wash over him, and then he was standing in the most beautiful place he had ever seen. The hidden valley was even more magnificent than it had looked from outside, and flowers of every color grew everywhere, and the trees had leaves of silver and gold, and a river of crystal clear water flowed through the middle. "The golden flower grows at the heart of the valley," the little dragon said as it flew ahead, "and I will lead you there." Leo followed the dragon through the valley, and he passed by creatures he had never seen before. Rabbits with wings, and deer with scales, and birds that sang in human voices. Everything in the valley seemed alive with magic, and Leo felt like he was walking through a dream, but he knew this time the dream was real. After walking for a while, they came to a clearing in the center of the valley, and there in the middle of the clearing was a single flower that took Leo's breath away. The flower was as tall as Leo himself, and its petals were made of pure gold that glowed in the sunlight, and its center was silver like moonlight, and it was the most beautiful thing Leo had ever seen. "The golden flower of healing," the little dragon said with reverence in its voice, "and one petal from this flower can cure any sickness and heal any wound." Leo approached the flower carefully, almost afraid to touch something so beautiful and precious. "You may take one petal," a voice said, and Leo turned to see a woman standing nearby, and she was dressed in robes of green and gold, and flowers grew in her hair. "I am the queen of the hidden valley," the woman said with a gentle smile, "and I have watched your journey with great admiration, and you have earned the right to take what you need." Leo bowed to the queen and thanked her with all his heart, and then he reached out and gently plucked a single golden petal from the flower. The petal felt warm in his hand and seemed to glow with an inner light, and Leo knew that this tiny thing held the power to save his grandmother's life. "Now you must return home," the queen said, "and the path back will be shorter than the path here, for that is the reward for those who complete the trials." Leo thanked the queen again, and the little dragon flew around his head happily, and together they left the clearing and headed back toward the archway that would take him home. Leo walked through the hidden valley with the golden petal held carefully in his hands, and the little dragon flew beside him, and his heart was filled with hope and joy. When they reached the golden archway, Leo turned to take one last look at the beautiful valley, and he felt grateful that he had been allowed to see such a magical place. "Are you ready to go home?" the little dragon asked, and its voice was gentle and kind. Leo nodded and stepped through the archway, and the golden light surrounded him, and he felt like he was floating through the stars. When the light faded, Leo found himself standing not on top of the mountain but at the edge of the forest, right near his own village, and the queen had kept her promise that the path home would be shorter. The sun was setting, and Leo could see the lights of the village twinkling in the distance, and he started running toward home as fast as his legs could carry him. The little dragon flew beside him, and it seemed to sparkle in the fading light, and some of the villagers who saw them pass rubbed their eyes in disbelief. Leo ran down the familiar streets of the village, past the baker's shop and the blacksmith's forge and the old well in the center of town, until he reached the small cottage with the red door. He threw open the door, and it creaked loudly as if happy to see him, and he rushed inside to find his grandmother. She was lying in her bed, looking even more pale and weak than when Leo had left, and the village healer was sitting beside her with a worried expression. "Leo!" the healer exclaimed in surprise. "Where have you been, and what is that thing flying around your head?" But Leo did not stop to explain, and he ran to his grandmother's bedside and held up the golden petal. "I found it, grandmother," Leo said with tears in his eyes. "I found the golden flower in the hidden valley, and I brought back a petal to heal you." His grandmother opened her eyes weakly and looked at the glowing petal, and a small smile crossed her tired face. The healer took the petal from Leo's hands and examined it with wonder, and he knew immediately that this was something magical and powerful. "I will make the tea right away," the healer said as he hurried to the kitchen, and soon the cottage was filled with the sweet smell of the golden petal brewing in hot water. Leo sat beside his grandmother and held her hand, and the little dragon landed on his shoulder and watched quietly. "My brave boy," his grandmother whispered. "You did it, and I am so proud of you." The healer returned with a cup of golden tea that seemed to glow from within, and he helped Leo's grandmother drink it slowly. As she drank the tea, color began to return to her cheeks, and her breathing became stronger, and life seemed to flow back into her body. By the time she finished the cup, Leo's grandmother looked like a different person, still old but healthy and strong, with bright eyes and a warm smile. She sat up in bed and pulled Leo into a tight hug, and they both cried happy tears. "Tell me everything," his grandmother said. "Tell me about your journey and the trials you faced and how you found the hidden valley." And so Leo told her everything about Elara in the crystal cottage, about the trial of truth where he faced his shadow self, about the trial of trust where he helped Maya cross the dark river, and about the trial of sacrifice where he gave up the dream of a perfect life. His grandmother listened with wonder and pride, and when Leo introduced the little dragon, she laughed with delight. "This is the most amazing story I have ever heard," his grandmother said, "and you have become a true hero, my dear Leo." The little dragon chirped happily and flew around the room, and even the healer smiled at the magical creature. Word spread quickly through the village about Leo's adventure, and soon everyone wanted to hear his story, and the villagers came to the cottage to see the boy who had found the hidden valley. Leo told his story again and again, and each time he told it, he remembered how scared he had been at the beginning, and he realized how much he had grown and changed. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, and Leo's grandmother grew stronger every day until she was even healthier than before she had gotten sick. The little dragon stayed with Leo and became his constant companion, and the other children in the village looked at Leo with admiration and respect. But Leo did not let the attention change him, and he remained kind and humble, always remembering the lessons he had learned on his journey. One day, as Leo sat by the fire with his grandmother, she asked him what he had learned from his adventure. Leo thought for a moment before answering, and the little dragon curled up in his lap as he spoke. "I learned that being brave does not mean not being afraid," Leo said, "but it means doing what is right even when you are scared." His grandmother nodded with approval, and Leo continued. "I learned that telling the truth about who you are, even the parts you do not like, makes you stronger, not weaker. And I learned that trust is a gift you give to others, and when you help someone else be brave, you become braver too." "But the most important thing I learned," Leo said as he looked at his grandmother with love, "is that real happiness is not about avoiding pain, but about loving so much that the pain is worth it." His grandmother had tears in her eyes, and she hugged Leo tightly and told him that he had become wiser than many people who lived 100 years. That night, As Leo lay in bed with the little dragon sleeping beside him, he thought about all the amazing things that had happened. He had started his journey as a scared boy who had never done anything special, and he had returned as someone who had faced trials and discovered strength he never knew he had. He thought about Elara in her crystal cottage, and he hoped that someday he would see her again and thank her properly for all her help. He thought about the spirit of trust and the guardian of the gate, and he wondered if other children would someday take the same journey and face the same trials. And he thought about the hidden valley, that beautiful magical place where the golden flower grew, and he was grateful that such wonders existed in the world. As sleep began to take him, Leo made a promise to himself that he would always remember what he had learned, and he would always try to be brave and truthful and trusting, no matter what challenges life might bring. The little dragon seemed to sense his thoughts, and it glowed softly in the darkness, and Leo smiled. Years passed, and Leo grew from a boy into a young man, and then into a wise adult, but he never forgot his adventure. He told the story to his own children someday, and they told it to their children, and the tale of the boy who found the hidden valley became a legend in the village. And whenever someone faced a difficult challenge or felt afraid, they would remember Leo's story and find courage in it. Some people said the hidden valley was just a fairy tale, but those who looked into Leo's eyes knew that he had seen something real and magical. And on quiet nights, when the moon was full and the stars were bright, the villagers would sometimes see a tiny glowing dragon flying through the sky, and they knew that magic was real. Leo's grandmother lived for many more years, healthy and happy, and she and Leo spent their days together, cooking soup and telling stories and watching the seasons change. And Leo understood that this ordinary happiness was the greatest treasure of all, greater than any golden flower or magical valley. Because in the end, the real magic was not in some hidden place far away, but in the love between a boy and his grandmother, in the courage to face fears, and in the choice to be good even when it was hard. And that magic was available to everyone, not just heroes who completed trials, but anyone who opened their heart and dared to believe. This was the true lesson of Leo's journey, and it was a lesson that would echo through time forever.